Somewhere right now, on a phone screen you will never see, there is a video of a 3-year-old girl dancing. She is laughing. Her mother is laughing too. The caption says something sweet, something about making the most of their time together. If you scrolled past it on your feed, you would keep scrolling. Nothing to see here. Just a mom and her daughter having fun. Now, hold that image in your head, because in 17 days, that same mother will be under arrest. In 17 days, that little girl will be dead. And 9 days after that, this woman will stand in front of her phone camera again, lip-syncing to a sad song, before posting a dance challenge video captioned, "Laughing face, dancing always helps me." 2 days after that, she will post about how happy she is with a new makeup purchase. This is the story of Kaylee Jayde Priest. She was 3 years old. And by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly how a woman capable of performing motherhood so convincingly for an audience of strangers could, behind closed doors, be responsible for 19 broken ribs on her own daughter's body. This is not a story about TikTok. TikTok is just where the mask slipped into public view. This is a story about what happens in the silence between the videos. Before we go further, if you find yourself drawn to cases like this, ones that force us to confront the darkest corners of what people are capable of behind a smiling filter, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover cases exactly like this, always grounded in court record and confirmed fact, never sensationalized for the sake of clicks. If you're one of our regular viewers already, thank you for trusting us to tell these stories properly. Let's continue. The morning of the 9th of August, 2020 started like any other in Stonebridge Crescent, in the Kingshurst area of Birmingham. At 11:25 a.m., emergency services were called to a property known as Kingshurst House. When paramedics and police arrived, they found a 3-year-old girl lying lifeless in her bedroom. Her name was Kaylee Jayde Priest, and within minutes of arriving, she was pronounced dead at the scene. On paper, this could have been treated as a tragic accident or a sudden unexplained death, the kind that, devastating as it is, sometimes simply happens to young children with no obvious cause. But the first responders on scene knew almost immediately that something was wrong. This was a healthy 3-year-old with no underlying medical conditions, and she had visible bruising on her body. That single detail was enough to change the entire trajectory of the case. Instead of treating this as a medical tragedy, paramedics called detectives to the scene. Think about what that moment must have looked like from the inside. Paramedics trained to save lives, walking into a child's bedroom expecting a medical emergency, and instead finding a body that told a very different story, bruising in places a healthy, active toddler shouldn't have bruising. The kind of instinct that makes a first responder pause and think, this needs more than an ambulance. This needs detectives. Kaylee's mother, 24-year-old Nicola Priest, was arrested that same day. Because she could not give police a satisfactory account of how her daughter had come to be covered in bruises and lying dead in her bedroom, she was treated as a suspect from the outset. She was questioned and then released on bail while the investigation continued. At this stage, nothing had been proven in a court of law. An arrest is not a conviction, and at this point in the timeline, Nicola was simply a mother under investigation following the unexplained death of her daughter. It's an important distinction because for the next several weeks, while detectives quietly built their case behind the scenes, the public version of Nicola Priest's grief was playing out somewhere else entirely, on a phone screen, in front of an audience of strangers who had no idea what police already suspected. It's what happened next that turned this from a devastating local news story into something that would spark national outrage. 10 days after Kaylee's death, Nicola posted a tribute video to TikTok. The caption read, "R.I.P. my baby!" In the video, she is seen crying, mouthing along to the lyrics of a song called "To My Parents." The lyrics, for anyone unfamiliar, goes something like this: an apology to a parent, an admission of having messed up, a promise to do better. Whether this was a genuine expression of grief or something else entirely is something you'll have to make your own mind up about, but investigators would go on to view it, at minimum, as deeply uncomfortable in hindsight. For days after that video, on the 17th of August, Nicola posted another tribute. This one read, "I love you so much, darling. Mommy will never forget you ever, R.I.P. Angel." Then, one day later, a single day, she posted a TikTok dance challenge video. The caption read, "Way too serious, laughing face, dancing always helps me." 2 days after that, on the 23rd of August, she posted what would turn out to be her final video on the platform. The caption read, "Love my makeup, purchase everything goes perfect." That was the last thing Nicola Priest ever posted. Not long after, once the forensic investigation had concluded, both Nicola and her boyfriend at the time, Callum Redfern, were formally charged with Kaylee's murder. We're about to get into exactly what that forensic investigation uncovered, and it does not get any easier from here. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here that wants the full truth of these cases, not the sanitized version. Alright, let's get into the postmortem. The case against Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern was built on the findings of Kaylee's postmortem examination, combined with CCTV footage and a trail of digital evidence that painted a picture prosecutors would later describe in devastating detail. The postmortem revealed that Kaylee had suffered significant injuries to her chest and abdomen. She had sustained severe internal injuries consistent with an assault, including small tears to her brain and a punctured lung. Pathologists concluded these injuries were the result of heavy blows, potentially kicks, stamps, a punch, or an extremely forceful slap to the head. The description given in court was chilling in its precision. Injuries similar to what you might expect to see in a road traffic collision. Not a fall. Not an accident. The kind of trauma inflicted by another person, with force. But it was what the postmortem found beyond the fatal injuries that made this case so much harder to comprehend. Some of Kaylee's injuries showed clear signs of healing, dated back roughly 2 weeks before her death. This wasn't a single, isolated incident of violence. This was a pattern. A 3-year-old girl had been living with the physical evidence of abuse on her body for weeks before the assault that finally killed her. CCTV footage, some of which included the very clip of Kaylee at the park referenced at the start of this video, helped investigators establish a timeline. Footage showed both Nicola and Callum at the flat on the 7th of August. They left at points, but they kept returning, and from a certain point onward, neither of them left the property. Callum arrived again on the 8th of August, this time with a friend, and left at some point later that day. Police would determine that the window in which Callum was present at the property was the window in which the fatal assault took place. Both Nicola and Callum were charged with murder. Both denied it. Both also faced lesser charges of manslaughter, allowing the death of a child, and child cruelty. The trial opened at Birmingham Crown Court in June 2021, and what emerged over the following weeks was a story more disturbing than the post-mortem findings alone could convey. The court heard that Kaylee had been subjected to a brutal assault at some point on the 8th of August 2020, but she did not die instantly. Medical evidence presented in court suggested that had she been taken to hospital promptly, there was a real chance she could have survived. Instead, by the time Nicola called emergency services the next morning, her daughter was already dead. That detail, the gap between the assault and the call for help, became one of the most damning parts of the prosecution's case. The prosecution suggested a possible catalyst for the violence. Evidence indicated Nicola and Callum had been spending what was described in court as time alone together in the bedroom, and that Kaylee may have interrupted them. What followed in court was two adults, both charged with murdering a child, turning on each other. Nicola told police that on a previous occasion, she recalled hearing Callum punch Kaylee. On the day in question, she said she had gone outside for a cigarette while Callum put Kaylee to bed, and that in the time she was gone, Callum had struck Kaylee for biting him while helping her into her pajamas, despite there being no visible bite mark on his hand to support that account. Callum, for his part, tried to shift blame onto Nicola during police interviews, though he ultimately chose not to give evidence in court himself. What the court did hear extensively was testimony from people who had witnessed Nicola's behavior toward her daughter well before that final assault. Testimony that painted a picture of abuse escalating gradually over time, in full view of the people around her. The mother of Nicola's ex-boyfriend, who Nicola had lived with back in 2018, told the court that Nicola would refer to Kaylee using cruel, degrading language. According to this witness, that verbal cruelty didn't stay verbal. Over time, it progressed into what she described in her statement as the odd smack, with an open hand on Kaylee's arms and legs. This wasn't a stranger reporting hearsay. This was someone who had lived under the same roof, who had watched the relationship between mother and daughter change in real time, and who felt compelled, years later, to stand in a courtroom and say so. A 17-year-old girl who had sometimes helped Nicola babysit also gave evidence. She told the court that approximately 1 month before Kaylee's death, she witnessed Nicola slap her daughter around the head, twice in anger. The first time was because Kaylee asked for food. The second was because Kaylee, a 3-year-old acting exactly like a 3-year-old, had placed a blanket over her baby brother's face. Neither of those moments called for violence. Both were met with it. Callum's friend, the same friend who had accompanied him to the flat on the day of the fatal assault, also gave evidence. He told the court he hadn't witnessed any outright violence, and that things had seemed, in his words, like a normal routine. But he also testified to something that, in hindsight, reads very differently. After wanting to leave the flat for some time, with Callum reluctant to go, something shifted. Suddenly, Callum wanted to leave in a hurry. No clear reason given. They simply left. Whatever happened in that flat in the time before they departed remains, in this friend's account at least, unseen. The court was also told about the conditions Kaylee had been living in day to day. Her bedroom had no carpet. Her mattress was described as dirty. When paramedics entered that same room on the morning she was found, they couldn't even switch on the light. There was no bulb. A small detail, but one that sat uncomfortably alongside everything else the jury was hearing. A child living in visible neglect, in a home where basic care seemed to have quietly stopped somewhere along the way. I have to pause here for a moment, because what comes next, the messages between Nicola and Callum in the days before Kaylee's death, is some of the most disturbing evidence I've come across covering cases like this. If you want to keep supporting channels that are willing to sit with the uncomfortable parts of these stories, instead of glossing over them, drop a like on this video before we continue. It genuinely helps this kind of coverage reach more people. Okay, let's get into it. Prosecutors were unable to definitively pinpoint which of the two adults delivered the fatal blows. But text messages recovered between Nicola and Callum made it clear that responsibility, in one form or another, sat with both of them. In an exchange dated the 24th of July, 2020, just over 2 weeks before Kaylee's death, Nicola wrote to Callum, "I'm going to kill her because she keeps leaving the living room or going into the kitchen, so I've hit her and smacked her." Callum responded, "Good, give her one from me." Nicola replied, "I will, babe." 3 days later, Callum sent Nicola a message describing his frustration with Kaylee in cruel, dehumanizing terms, saying he was going to keep her away from him and that he was sick of her. Following the trial, both Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern were cleared of murder. They were found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. Nicola was additionally found guilty of child neglect in relation to Kaylee's earlier healing injuries. Nicola Priest was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Callum Redfern was sentenced to 14 years. We've covered a number of cases recently where a parent has gone on to kill their own child, and every single time, the same question sits at the center of it. How does the one person a child should be able to trust completely become the one they needed protection from? In Kaylee's case, there were warning signs that reached beyond the four walls of that flat. Nicola's own mother had, at one point, contacted social services to raise concerns about the abuse she believed was happening. It remains unclear what action, if any, was taken as a result of that contact. What is clear is that Nicola's mother later stood in court and gave evidence against her own daughter, in the hope of securing justice for her granddaughter. It is genuinely difficult to comprehend how a mother carries a child for 9 months, brings her into the world, and then goes on to inflict, over time, the kind of abuse that leaves a 3-year-old's body with 19 fractured ribs. It's harder still to understand the apparent priorities at play here. Court evidence painted a picture of a household where a decent mattress, a working light bulb, or proper food for a toddler seemed to matter less than the relationship between the two adults in that flat. And that's really the thread running through this entire case. Every witness account, every text message, every detail about the bedroom points to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Kaylee wasn't just failed by one bad decision on one bad day. She was failed gradually, repeatedly, by two adults who consistently chose each other over her, right up until the moment that choice cost her life. The tribute videos, the dance challenge, the makeup haul, none of it was ever really about Kaylee. It was, at best, a performance of grief for an audience. At worst, it was simply Nicola's life continuing exactly as it always had, indifferent to the daughter she just lost. There's one final detail from this case that, in a strange way, says as much about the dynamic between Nicola and Callum as anything else. Nicola had saved £900 from her universal credit payments. For anyone outside the UK unfamiliar with the term, that's a form of government welfare support, specifically to buy Callum a car. Whatever her reasoning, It was money set aside for him. Callum used 600 pounds of it to actually buy the car. He kept the remaining 300 pounds for himself. If this case affected you the way it affected us researching it, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss one of these deep dives when it goes live. To everyone who's been watching these cases with us week after week, thank you, genuinely, for being here. We'll see you in the next one.